What is going on? Happy New Year. Again, it's the MMA Podcast 154, bringing you the second edition of the podcast in 2016. Got a lot to talk about. This past weekend was UFC 195. We had a lot of fun fights. Stipe Miocic with a KO over Andrei Arlovski in a fight most we're talking about because of the scorecard. Robbie Lawler and Carlos Condit. Going to be talking about that. A few bits of news coming through the horn, including just a few minutes ago, we got news on a potential UFC 197 main and co-main event in Vegas. Holm, Tate, McGregor, Dos Anjos in a couple months. More to talk about, too. It's going to be a fun show. Thanks for listening. Let's do it.
We did it for the love of the game. I did it for. The game will never be the same. I did it for.
You're listening to the MMA Podcast.
It is the MMA Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in on, what day is it? January 7th. This is January 7th evening of 2016. We had our annual TMP Awards last week. We had Santa Claus on a couple weeks ago. We're on a good roll. Look to keep it going. And if it does come to a stop, it won't be because of lack of things to talk about. We have a fun UFC 195 that went down on Saturday. A bit of news, all sorts of stuff going on. Seated to my left about 2,000 miles toward the West Coast in Palm Desert, Cali, sits the co-host of the show on Twitter at Sweet Pappy Jones. It's P-Money. What's going on, brother?
Big Jake. We're just big chilling out here in SoCal. We got hit by old El Nino. Thank goodness, the drought situation. We certainly need that rain we've been getting over here. Even the Dirty D got a little bit of rain out here. So we're taking a break in between the storm to break a little bit of news with you. Even we got some stuff to break down, as you mentioned, Jake. But we also got some interesting developments that just got reported not too long ago. Can't wait to get into that. And I also must say, you'd mentioned we did the MMA Podcast Awards on, it was actually New Year's Day. January 2nd in your time zone, I believe it was. It was a little bit later, but, we all had a couple pops. And, myself, Jake, Jay, and none of us were really air ready. We all made the decision to go to rehab. We went and we did our thing. And the doctors, when we were there, told us that we weren't really addicts. Everything was good, just to do our thing. So we were only there a day, got let out, and we're back just 6 days later to bring you the MMA Podcast again. So here we are in a much better frame of mind to break this news with y'all.
Breaking all sorts of news, UFC 197. Before we get to that, very briefly, I want to bring up something, if for no other reason than literally every podcast I listen to, whether it's the T-Row and Funky Show, the Rogan Podcast, Corolla, Bill Burr, everyone's talking about this Making a Murderer documentary on Netflix. Have you seen it? Do you have any thoughts on it? I mean, literally, if we want to fit in and be cool, like the rest of the cool podcasts, we at least got to touch on this. It's like some documentary about some guy who was thrown in jail but didn't do any crimes, and it's real, and people are super angry about it. Have you seen it, heard about it?
I've definitely heard about it over the past 3 days, social media everywhere, from MMA forums I frequent, the Facebooks, the everything. Everybody's talking about this. One thing I have heard was that there was some media source I was listening to. I believe I was listening to the radio earlier today even, and they were talking about how this quote-unquote documentary really seems to be filmed not in a journalistic gathering evidence from both sides. It really seems to be filmed in the sense of a documentary that's going to prove a guy innocent. or something to that extent, not necessarily impartial when presenting the facts. So I myself have not seen it. Thought that was interesting to hear because, again, on a lot of the forums I'd seen a lot of sentiment like, oh my gosh, like everybody's behind this guy. I'd actually seen an article that there was a petition like online that 200,000 people had signed to get this guy freed or something like that. Very interesting. Again, I have not seen the documentary. I've not read up on the case at all, but
Are you planning on watching it down the road?
Oh, probably not. That's not my thing. I will leave other people to do that. I got bigger fish to fry. I mean, I don't mean to sound callous. I would hate to think that there is an innocent person in jail for any circumstance. Sad but true. It does happen every now and again. But yeah, had heard about the allegations of local police framing him and things of that nature. If it is true, hopefully he is found and exonerated, and hopefully this media attention goes towards a good cause. But I've heard, again, reports on the other side that this is a documentary that really had omitted some things and was really looking to just prove this guy innocent as opposed to present both sides. I don't know, though. Again, that could just be the man trying to go along with the cover-up. So who knows? But God bless the people making it. If there's innocent people that need to be free, hopefully they are, and the truth is found and justice prevails.
Yeah, that's all fine and good, I guess. I honestly say fuck him. Like, yeah, sure, if he's innocent and enough people watch it, he should be freed, and I hope he gets freed and all that stuff. But pretty much everyone who I've heard talk about it says, yeah, watch it and it'll make you so mad and it'll really rile you up that this guy is innocent and he didn't do anything and he's in jail. This will really piss you off. Like, no, I want to watch cool shit. I want to watch, there's too much content out there and there's too much shit that's just whether it's a comedy, an action, a drama, sports, there's too much cool shit that's going to make me feel awesome and good. I'm not really in the business of watching shit that's going to piss me off. It doesn't move the needle, as Adam Carolla said.
Agreed.
Making a murderer talk. I
not on this podcast, damn it.
Had to fit that in. But we're back from rehab, like John Bones Jones. We're ready to dive back into it. And that brings us to that breaking news we talked about, UFC 197. We had just a couple days ago, Dana White said that Holly Holm will actually fight now before the Ronda fight, going against what he said before, that Holm's next opponent would be Ronda Rousey. Dana saying Holly will fight again. But the opponent was unclear. Miesha Tate seemed like the most logical answer. If not her, maybe Amanda Nunes. If not her, I have no idea who. More than likely Tate, though. And just literally, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes before we went live, tweets started to leak out that UFC 197, it's not official yet, but it's been confirmed through multiple sources who want to stay disclosed for obvious reasons. UFC 197 going down in Vegas on March 5th. That's just 2 months, people. And you're going to see it headlined by the two biggest stars of 2015. Holly Holm, fresh off her KO victory over Ronda Rousey, taking on Miesha Tate in what will likely be the co-main event. And in the main event, Conor McGregor, who talks about staying active, fighting a bunch. We see so many champions who will only fight a couple times a year because they know they're worth more as champion, and they really want to bleed out that title run as long as possible. Hats off to Conor for staying active. He's looking to be the second fighter after BJ Penn to hold two championships at once. I believe Penn is the only fighter to hold two belts at once, right? I know Couture has held two belts, but I believe holding it simultaneously. Penn's the only one, right?
You know what? Actually, I would have to pull up BJ Penn, but no, he was not simultaneous to my recollection. He did. Yeah, he went to go fight in Pride or something like that. I forget exactly what he went to go fight in Japan or something was ultimately what I think happened. He was a 2-division champion, but I don't think simultaneously. I think Dan Henderson is the only major MMA fighter, to hold. He held the Pride championships for 185 and 205 simultaneously, but that has not been done. He almost did it in Strikeforce too. God damn. That Jake Shields fight, he was so close to finishing Jake, but no, almost had it in Strikeforce as well, but no, nobody has been able to hold two belts simultaneously in the UFC.
Yeah, Dan, the welterweight and middleweight champ in Pride, and I'm looking now. Yeah. Penn was champion of both welterweight and lightweight, never held them both at the same time. And Randy Couture went from being champion of heavyweight to 205 and then back up, but none of those titles ran concurrent with one another. So this is going to be history-making stuff. We rarely see it attempted. I think the last time it was attempted was when Penn fought GSP, and at the time Penn was the lightweight champion and was trying to move up to get that second belt. We've had lots of talk about it. We've had rumors, whether it was Weidman Jones, whether it was GSP Silva, whether it's, Mighty Mouse and Dillashaw. We've heard rumblings. Aldo Pettis was officially scheduled, and Aldo was going for that, but it never happened. So I think the last attempt was, nearly a decade ago with Penn and GSP.
Yeah, to the best of my recollection, Penn versus GSP, the rematch, that was for GSP's title. Yeah, that was 07, or you know what, I want to say that might have been 09.
09, yep, it was January 09, UFC 94.
There we go.
So 7 years ago.
Man, that's a stretch.
So this is history-making stuff here, Connor. Not just moving up to fight for another belt, but doing it without getting a single defense of his first belt. I feel like the poster for this card should just be a giant middle finger with the word Frankie across it. Like, man, I do like this card a lot, and you won't hear me bitching and moaning that much about it. But once again, Frankie kind of getting the shaft here, man.
Yeah, Frankie's definitely getting the shaft on this one. I mean, we discussed it just a little bit. We were talking right before we went on air that with this schedule and allegedly, or I mean, at least theoretically, if all these are confirmed, which they appear to be at this point, but not official. If this goes official, one of the things Dana said is that Conor McGregor, one of the things he wants to do is he wants to fight for the 155-pound belt and then defend the 145-pound belt at UFC 200, if I'm not mistaken. But he was saying he wants to fight 4 times a year. He wants to win the lightweight belt, defend the featherweight, defend lightweight, defend featherweight. And he said, "Oh, you know what? This is a guy who has done everything he said he's going to do. So I'm going to give him his opportunity." If Conor McGregor doesn't get his ass stomped so severely, there's a chance he might be able to make it to UFC 200 in July to meet up with Frankie Edgar. That's probably not ideal. Frankie has been set on the sidelines for a good deal, it seems like. This is a guy, speaking of someone who should be fighting 4 times a year, does not seem like who's been as active as he probably should have been for, I mean, he's got to be in the prime of his career. If not, he's going to be exiting it fairly soon. So
he's 36, I think, something like that.
Gee whiz, I was thinking like 32 or something, but wow. For combat sports, that's getting up there, especially in the lighter weight classes. But
Ooh, he's 34.
34.
We
Oh, right in
tied
the
him.
middle. Right in the middle there. Um, I think Frankie, I mean, if Connor can make it healthy to UFC 200, that is not too long of a layoff. That is the only way I could see Frankie not being completely pissed about it. But man, that is a tough fight he's going in there for. We saw how RDA just mopped up the floor with Cerrone, and we saw what he did to Pettis, and we saw the way he stomped Benson Henderson. He's been steamrolling guys lately. Granted, so is Conor McGregor. He's been doing the same thing, but um, it is going to be a tough one. And let's not forget, Conor McGregor, he likes to knock people out. He likes to hurt people. Rafael Dos Anjos, he's got that titanium jaw or whatever it is. I really honestly question if that is a medical advantage. I mean, again, I'm no doctor, but I could only imagine it would be, although at the same time, my intuition says once a bone is broken, it's never as strong. But I could have sworn they said he's got some titanium adamantium jaw going on or something like that. He has some reinforcement going on. And he'll definitely need it for the shots McGregor's going to be throwing. But, man, Frankie, he should be getting this shot. And I wish it were quicker. But, I mean, if he gets this shot in July, he's not getting screwed too bad.
Yeah, and I guess you can make that argument, especially with a lot of champions who are fighting twice a year. It's funny. I watched the Cerrone Dos Anjos card with a couple of friends who are mainstream fans. They don't really know that much, and I'm like, yeah, this dude with the belt, he has a steel jaw. And they're like, all right. I'm like, no, like he literally has a steel jaw. And man, I do too wonder, how much that's going to affect him. But yeah, it's looking like Conor's next two fights are going to be March 5th at UFC 197 against Rafael Dos Anjos for the lightweight championship, and then July 9th to defend his featherweight strap against Frankie Edgar. Man, I don't know if this is a stretch, but if Conor beats Rafael Dos Anjos, we have to start talking about him in the same air as Mighty Mouse Jones as far as being a pound-for-pound top guy. And then if he beats fucking Frankie Edgar, the guy who seems like he wins every single one of his fights, if he beats Dos Anjos and then beats Edgar, we got to start talking about Conor as a top 10 pound-for-pound greatest of all-time fighter. I mean, just that fucking run of his four fights, from Mendez to Aldo to Dos Anjos to Frankie Edgar. Four absolute murders. You have Mendez, who has only lost to Aldo. You have Aldo, who was the pound-for-pound king for the longest time, didn't lose in 10 years. Now one of the most dominant lightweight champions we've seen in a long time. And then another, pound-for-pound greatest of all-time fighter on a 5-fight win streak, Frankie Edgar, who's been torching dudes, just KO'd Chad Mendez. Like, this is a serious run Conor's going on.
Yeah, it certainly is. And if he's able to navigate it successfully, like you said, I mean, he would have to be thrown into the GOAT discussion. I mean, to come into the UFC and win the championships in what are arguably the two most stacked weight divisions that they have. Yeah, absolutely.
And then
and
past
especially
Edgar, he's looking at fucking Pettis, Habib, Max Holloway again. Like, fuck.
Yeah, potential opportunity for Joe Duffy to avenge the loss of Joe Duffy earlier in his career. But, I mean, heck, with the way things are going, I mean, Conor McGregor is going for his second championship here, and Joe Duffy just lost to the guy that moved up in weight class after Conor McGregor beat him. So, that circuitous MMA math, there it is. Who knows if the way things are going right now, Joe Duffy is not anywhere near Conor McGregor for a fight in either weight class. So, but no, again, that is still a murderer's row in the featherweight division and the lightweight division. There's no shortage of insane fights to be made for Conor McGregor. Again, though, that Rafael dos Anjos test there, that is such a big test. If he's able to navigate that, wow. I don't think anybody can doubt or question his skills. They absolutely cannot. Being a 2-division champion, if he beats Rafael dos Anjos, you cannot deny him, and you absolutely have to put him in the greatest of all time discussion.
And odds are actually already out for Conor versus RDA, just as a hypothetical. Up on 5 dimes, RDA the slightest of favorites, minus 120 to Conor's minus 110. Man, that
wow.
would be, and if it's true, will be a hell of a fight. Me and P Money might need to end up going to Vegas and doing a live show from Vegas like we did for 189. But yeah, that fight, Holm versus Tate, which is gonna be Holm seemed to struggle a bit with Rocky Pennington, and yeah, her team said she was holding back. But man, Tate has some solid wrestling, and if she really can put the pressure to Holm, Holm was able to deal with the fire against Rousey, but Tate's a much different style fighter. So that will be equally as compelling there. They should be a couple of fun fights, but yeah, unless you have anything else, you were just talking about Poirier versus Duffy, and that kind of segues us into the UFC 195 prelims nicely. UFC 195 this past Saturday at the MGM Grand Garden Arena, Lawler versus Condit. But as always, we'll start with the prelims. Joe Duffy and Dustin Poirier being the headline of the Fight Pass prelims. Duffy, we brought up the fact, Duffy has looked good, but who has he fought? Poirier's fought a crazy higher level of fighter, and that showed in this fight where Duffy wasn't able to win a round on any of the judges' scorecards. One of them had it as far as 30-26, all going to the diamond. Dustin Poirier, Mishinori Tanaka, and Sheldon Westcott also winning on the prelims. On Fight Pass, on Fox Sports 1, Drew Dober, Justine Kish, and Alex Morano, all decision winners over Scott Holtzman, Nina Ansaroff, and Kyle Noak. And in his return, Michael McDonald gets a slick second round rear naked choke against Masanori Kanehara. I'm usually able to watch the prelims, and I did go back and watch the Poirier and Mayday fights, but I actually missed a decent amount of the prelims. I forget what I was doing. I may have been running around to the bookstores trying to find cheap used books, but nonetheless, I caught the Poirier fight. He looked dominant. He looks to be a lot fresher at 155. I guess it's sort of bad news for him now that Conor's also going to move up, and he seemingly can't get away from him. But took the last guy to beat Conor and Joseph Duffy and put it to him, made him look like a much inferior fighter. And Mayday sort of did what we all thought he was going to do. He was the biggest favorite on the card and squished this Kanehara guy. Will be interesting to see who McDonald gets next after 2 years off. What did you think of the prelims?
Man, I thought the Fight Pass prelims were actually a bit better than the Fox Sports 1 prelims. It was definitely good to see Mayday get that W in the feature on Fox Sports 1. Was not having a good go of it at first, and was able to get the come from behind submission win in the second round there. Hopefully shaking off some of that ring rust from being out for over 2 years there. But, obviously, I think really, and potentially for me, I mean, of course, Poirier versus Duffy, I really hope they both got some locker room bonuses, because that, for me, fight of the year candidate. These guys were standing in the phone booth. They were trading. Uh, Definitely, he was more active in the clinch. Had a great series of uppercuts and elbows there in the first round. A couple really good jobs in the clinch, standing, getting his strikes in. Had a sweet, nice elbow right on the eyeball of Joe Duffy, real nasty, right on the left eye, and that swole him up and had him had his eye almost shut for the whole rest of the fight. And it was even on the feet, potentially even maybe even leaning a little bit more toward Duffy. Duffy also in the first round had some great moments rocking Poirier there. They were really going back and forth. And it was a little bit later in the first round when Poirier realized he was able to get the takedown on Duffy and was able to employ that in the second and third rounds and really put together some grappling. And it was a little thing. So he's in there with the striking game. Poirier was able to navigate it though, and he was able to get a really good victory. That was a grueling fight for both guys. Super bloody, fantastic fight, fantastic heart for both guys. Neither gave up at any point. Great back and forth war, and I mean, I dare say I could even make the argument that made his underneath fight of the night more so than the fight that ultimately got fight of the night, which we will get into in just.
Yeah, your quality went down a little bit there. Maybe maybe ease a little closer to the router if possible. We have to get you fixed up with a decent mic at some point if your birthday is around the corner or some shit. But yeah, that that was all we had for the prelims. Mostly decisions. We saw more finishes on the main card. Abel Trujillo getting a first round victory over Tony Sims. Like I said, I thought if Sims could stretch the fight out, he would have a much better chance. But Abel used his athleticism and explosiveness get that first round guillotine choke on Tony Sims. Brian T. City Ortega with a third round submission over Diego Brandao. In what was a close fight, but Ortega ends up winning. And a fight I thought for sure was going to be finished actually went the entire way. Albert Tumenov with a split decision over Lorenz Larkin. Watching the fight, I thought Albert was winning the fight, and I thought he was a pretty clear 2-1 winner. I thought it was sort of weird how Joe and Goldberg were making it seem like every time Larkin landed a leg kick, like it was complete and utter destruction. I definitely scored them, but not nearly as much. They were going ape shit over the leg kicks. I thought the correct fighter won, though, and I also scored it to the guy who got the split decision victory in Albert Tumenov, who, he joined the UFC in 2014, lost in his first fight to Aldemar Alcantara, split decision. Since then, he's on a 5-fight win streak, and these wins against Alan Jouban and Lorenz Larkin probably bode well for him as far as him getting a decent opponent in his next fight. The young 24-year-old Russian looks to have a bright future in the UFC. What'd you make of those 3 fights?
I thought they were all great shots. Definitely, I love seeing Trujillo get the win. I really like him. Always brings fight. Definitely.
You've gotten a little bit worse there. I don't know. Yeah, is your Wi-Fi hooked up?
Yeah, we're going. We're going. How's the? I know we are a normal podcast position here,
It's rough.
Man,
And it might be on my end because I think it's storming over here. Go ahead and give us the condensed version of what you thought of those 3 fights, and then when I get on about the co-main event, I'll end the call and try and call you back. And if you are listening live on Ustream and you want to join, this dysfunctional chat, you can call us 213-457-3380. Talk about UFC 195. Talk about whatever. So go ahead and give us a concise breakdown of those 3 fights, and then we'll reestablish the call when I'm talking about Stipe and Andre.
Yeah, that's perfect. It could be inclement weather conditions over here, but I feel that, great finishes all the way around. Except for, as you mentioned, the Tumanov-Larkin fight going to the decision, as neither of us thought it would. I also thought Tumanov should have gotten the W in that one. It was a good scrap. And the Brian Ortega fight, I was really surprised that Diego Brandao was winning basically that entire fight up until Ortega got the submission. So good on him for coming from behind, and some good action to kick off the pay-per-view card there.
Yeah, we'll see if we can reestablish this call right quick. But the co-main event. Jesus Christ, I don't think anyone really knew what to expect between Stipe and Arlovsky. Both of them were on these great runs. No one, I saw a lot of picking toward both sides, but I didn't really see anyone that definite on either side. Stipe put a stamp on it, looked excellent, beating Andre, I believe, 54 seconds in with a TKO. Pat, what did you think of Stipe's win?
Well, I thought it was fantastic. Stipe, the young athletic buck coming in there, he's on a mission, obviously. He's paying hard for a shot. And he certainly made a nice statement there coming in and derailing the Arlovsky return hype train. Had a good UFC winning streak going back from the days when he left to go to Affliction. He had there's UFC, so technically I forget what it ultimately was before Stevie, and they're 54, 56, some that effect, and putting hands on Arlovsky. And Stipe, certainly, that Junior Dos Santos fight was really close. It's definitely got to be, he's in the mix, as I believe Dana White would say, for number one contender for the UFC Heavyweight Championship. Just really seems to be putting together all this training, the conditioning. He's a quick heavyweight, big frame. He's got the boxing, he's got the wrestling. And he certainly seems like a threat. It'll be interesting to see if, we really got to see what happens with Kane versus Verdum number 2 here, because who knows if Kane wins, maybe they do a trilogy. There's potentially a couple other contenders that could be in the mix that may get a shot beforehand. Who really knows? But, man, Miocic certainly seems to be the number one candidate for number one contender right now after his smashing of Arlovsky. And although I must also say I was glad to see that Arlovsky didn't completely lose consciousness. He was certainly TKO, but I'm glad that Herb Dean was there, referee, and stepped in when he did. I thought it was an appropriate stoppage, and glad that it ended without Arlovsky taking more damage than he needed to.
Yeah, especially for a guy who's getting older and has been finished pretty brutally multiple times. I thought it was a good stoppage too. Stipe looking so good, almost as good as Pat's phone quality was toward the end of that bit. It sounded crystal clear. man, as far as who's next for the title, there's only one scenario I can see them making the Kane Verdum trilogy fight, because to make a fight 3 times in a row is so bad for both fighters' reps, because fighters are fighting tons of guys around them and just getting better and better, and you have two guys stalled out. Even if this is a draw, I don't think we see a trilogy fight. The only way I could see a trilogy fight is if we see not just a robbery, but like a robbery of like historical proportions, like a robbery where like everyone and their mom scored it 4-1 or 5-0 toward the guy who ended up losing. That's the only real scenario I could see them running it back a third time. And as far as who's next in line, you have Overeem, you have Stipe. Reem probably sells a few more tickets. He's the much more recognizable name to both the mainstream and MMA fans. I think Stipe may have successfully lobbied. If he had sort of been quiet and calm and finished it and been like, yeah, I'm willing to fight whoever the UFC puts in front of me. If he had pulled one of those, I think he would have gotten leapfrogged. But Stipe knocks out Andrei Arlovsky, the only dude not named Rumble Johnson to finish Arlovsky or even beat him in almost a decade. Finishes him in under a minute, and then runs straight to Dana, sitting in the front row, screams at him Brock Lesnar style, "I want the title." I think that may have actually earned him a shot. Stuff like that gets pretty far with Dana. And I think Stipe earned a shot maybe this summer against the winner of Kane and Verdum. Do you think Stipe ends up getting it next, or who are you betting that we see next up in line?
No, I think Stipe has to get that fight next. Overeem did do a good job with that knockout of Junior Dos Santos there, really making a solid case. I know that he's a fairly big ticket, or at least, well, certainly more a few years ago when he came to the UFC. Certainly a big ticket in the heavyweight division, and he's close. But I certainly think Stipe would be a better fit to get that shot first. Overeem, maybe 1 or 2 more fights. I mean, he did go through a pretty rough patch there. Let him get one, maybe.
Yeah, you blinked out there for a few seconds, but I believe you're back.
Yes, 1,000 pardons there. Yeah, I think Stipe he's got to be the next guy to go. He's got to be up for the title next. Overeem, let him get maybe 1 or 2 more wins. In my opinion, he's really the only guy. I mean, of course, Rothwell, he's got a little streak going now himself, but for some reason, I'm just not buying Rothwell as the heavyweight title threat. I think he needs another one himself. Even though he does have the knockout victory over Overeem, I think Stipe should be the next number one contender.
I do too, and judging by the fact that we're both saying Stipe should earn it, should deserve it, the UFC probably won't give it to him, because they seem to, at least recently, have been in the business of giving out some shiesty-ass title shots. Moving on, speaking of shiesty-ass title shots, let's get to Robbie Lawler and Carlos Condit.
Yes, perfect segue.
Condit on a very long 1-fight win streak, having beaten Thiago Alves after his long layoff after an injury against Tyron Woodley. Fighting Robbie Lawler, we all knew that it would be a very interesting matchup between 2 master strikers, and it didn't disappoint. Long story short, it pointed out the weaknesses in a 10-point must system where, not all rounds are the same, and if there's a 5-round fight, it's basically what the 10-point must system does to an MMA fight is it turns it into like skins play golfing, where you could dominate someone on one hole and you just win the hole, and then you barely lose to the guy on the next one, and it's an even match because we're scoring all rounds the same. This was a fight where Carlos Condit easily won the first round and the fourth round 10-9. Robbie Lawler easily won the second round and the fifth round 10-9. The third round is the pivot point. Do you give Condit the round because he was a lot more active, throwing more, landing more, or do you give Robbie the benefit of the doubt because he landed some harder punches? He had Condit in reverse a lot of the round. Even though Condit was throwing more, Lawler seemed to be the one walking down Condit, was landing bigger strikes, but Condit's more active. Most people scored it to Condit. I scored it to Condit. Most everyone I saw on Twitter, I'll pull up the MMA decisions link in a second here. Most everyone I saw scored it 48-47 Condit. The rest of the cards I saw were 48-47 Lawler because they gave the third round to Lawler. The judges scored rounds 1, 2, 4, and 5 the same. 1 and 4 to Condit, 2 and 5 to Lawler. So at least I got to give him credit there. And 2 judges scored that third round to Lawler, 1 to Condit. Was it a robbery? No, I think Jacare versus Romero was a robbery, but not this fight because that third round could have gone either way, depending on how you personally judge a fight. Pat, you had my favorite tweet of the entire night, which was, man, people get pretty pissed off about robberies, but when Lawler wins a robbery, people don't seem to be that pissed. Robbie's a very likable guy. We like seeing him win. We love the story of him, just 4 or 5 years ago being on the verge of retirement in the Strikeforce to being a UFC champion. The story is great. He seems like a good person. He's been doing this a long time. And no one hates seeing him win, which you brought up. Like, man, I feel like people would be a lot more pissed if it just wasn't Robbie Lawler getting the better side of this. Because, Pat, you and I both agree that once again, was it a robbery? Was it a straight-up train robbery? No. But was this another fight that the judges gave him that he probably shouldn't have won? Which, man, it's tough because if we're scoring an entire fight, maybe Lawler wins it, and maybe it, like I said, points out the intrinsic shittery of the 10-9 must. But with the current system we're using, the 10-9 must, I think Lawler probably should have lost both of those fights. I'm not that mad about it. I don't want to see a rematch. I love Robbie, who I've met and is one of the nicest fucking guys ever. But yeah, Lawler takes it 48-47, 47-48, 48-47. What did you think about the fight? What did you think about the scorecard? What was your reaction? Break it down for us, Pat.
Well, Jake, I was a little bit heated with this one. I feel that this was a fight not unlike Johnny Hendricks versus GSP, Alexander Gustafsson versus John Jones, where I'm watching this fight and I'm watching the challenger beat up the champion, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure we've got a new champion coming here. And then the champion retains the belt, and I'm left scratching my head. And I said, did I have one too many beers here? What is going on? And then, at least with both of those other fights, I've gone back and rewatched and said, no, Johnny Hendricks and Alexander Gustafsson definitely should have won those respective championship fights, at least in my opinion. But I certainly felt Condit had done more than enough. And the thing with the 10 point, it's not 10-9 must. it's a 10-point must.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you're a huge proponent of the draw as well, and you don't always have to do 10-9, and you know, and it just, even that in and of itself does point out some problems with just the way that we judge things. Is there ever really an equal round? And how do you have an equal round? Doesn't somebody theoretically have to win a round, even if by just the most minute of increments? And aren't there rounds being won? I mean, obviously, it's just so rare that you even have a 10-8. The 10-10 is even more rare. 10-7s pretty much don't exist, and so on and so forth. There could be different ways to score it, but the way it is right now, it's so difficult and so subjective. I really need to go back and rewatch that entire fight, specifically that third round, because to me, I thought clear as day Carlos Condit won that fight. Even Dana White himself at the post-fight press conference said that he had Condit winning that fight. And Dana White, sometimes he'll say who he thought won the fight, but I mean, hell, I don't remember him saying that at the Johnny Hendricks Robbie Lawler fight. Maybe he did. Maybe in their second fight. I do not recall him saying that. He was just up there. Oh, I'm not the judge, but he said it at the 195 post-fight press conference that he thought Condit won that. And I mean, of course, Joe Rogan, I think a lot of us had seen his comments that this is a highlight that says that we should really look into alternative refereeing and scoring and things of that nature. And I do think, I mean, hell, if I went to Vegas and put some money on Carlos Condit, I would have felt pretty good knowing that I was going to cash out on that ticket watching that fight. And I feel that that is a ticket that should have cashed for everybody who did bet on Carlos Condit, because, I mean, it was a close fight. It was a close fight. I think at best you can score that a draw, at best. But I do not think that was Robbie Lawler's fight. Carlos Condit, I mean, granted, Condit was hurt, and he was pretty rough in the fifth round there. Lawler, with his epic fifths, came back, and he was putting a good beating on Condit, who was just able to survive in there. But Condit, hell, in like the fourth round, had Robbie Lawler in a pretty similar bad way. There was actually a few times in that fight where Carlos Condit had Robbie Lawler turtled up. You certainly could, I don't know, at least me, with the level of punishment and pressure and just the fact that he was winning the round in general, then the level at which he had Lawler hurt, you could potentially make an argument for some 10-8 rounds for Condit, at least me. I mean, hey, you can make an argument for a 10-8 round for Lawler in the fifth. You could potentially make an argument for a 10-10 round in the third. It's one I definitely need to go back and certainly will be going back to rewatch again. But I thought Condit certainly should have gotten the nod. And Robbie Lawler, of course, we all love watching him fight. He puts on the kind of performances that we need in mixed martial arts for it to grow as a sport, and the kind of fights that we love to see. So it was disappointing for me that the appropriate judge or the appropriate fighter did not get the belt in that fight, but it was certainly one of the better fights we've ever seen, and definitely a fight of the year candidate. Everybody, both fighters certainly left it all in there, as they say.
Yeah, and that man, you've got a title picture now at welterweight. You know what's funny? You have Robbie Lawler, Carlos Condit, Damian Maia, Tyron Woodley. You know who beat all four of those guys? Lawler, Condit, Woodley, Maia. Jake Shields.
Oh, wow.
Maybe the UFC needs to look into bringing Jake Shields back, because he has some wins against a lot of these guys. As far as who each guy should fight next, we like to play matchmaker a lot on the MMA podcast here. Rory McDonald, I believe, is scheduled to fight Hector Lombard soon. Am I correct? McDonald and Lombard, is that?
Oh, yeah, I could have sworn I heard that somewhere. Very
It's
interesting fight there.
difficult to keep up with all of it. I don't know if that's official or not. I know Rory has wanted to fight Condit to avenge that loss to Condit. He hasn't fought since losing to Lawler back at UFC 189. Looking at the rankings, a lot of tough fights. I don't think we ever saw Matt Brown versus Condit. That would be a fun fight. It was scheduled to go down, but I think Brown backed out with a back injury or something, so we never saw Brown Condit. That would be a fun fight. I think Brown just beat Tim Means. And was going to fight Kelvin a couple months ago, but had an ankle injury and was replaced by Neil Magny. So I think Brown's looking for a scrap too. Let's do that one. Let's make Brown Condit if I'm Joe Silva. What fight are you making for the Natural Born Killer?
Damn, I think that's a solid fight right there. NBK versus Matt Brown. That's got fireworks written all over it. Fairly similar styles. I'd certainly have to give the advantage to Condit, but man, Matt Brown, he's just as tough as they come. I think you either give him that fight or give him the loser of the Johnny Hendricks Wonderboy Thompson fight. I think ranking wise and just, they like to match losers up with losers fights. So I think that would be a good way to go for both fighters. Whoever the losing fighter of that fight may be. Of course, that is if Carlos Condit even decides he wants to stick with MMA. There was some talk of him retiring, which is such a shame because he was basically also at the post-fight press conference. Yeah, if I would have won the belt, probably would have just kept going. But now I'm pretty much thinking of hanging it up. And man, I cannot fault him. Well, I mean, of course, I would hate to see that, but that's certainly got to be disheartening, when you're in there and you think you've done enough. I really hope that Carlos Condit sticks with us and tries to work his way back to another crack at the title. But, I certainly think that if he does stay with us, Condit versus Matt Brown would be a solid fight, or the loser of Wonderboy versus Hendricks.
Does Tyron Woodley get the next shot at the belt?
Oh, I hope not. I honestly hope not. I the only way I want Woodley to get the next shot is if Johnny Hendricks loses to Wonderboy Thompson, and that's really the thing. If Hendricks loses to Thompson, I'm good with Woodley getting the shot. But if Hendricks beats Thompson, I don't know why he doesn't get that shot. I don't know why people are not clamoring for this title shot.
If Johnny beats Wonderboy, this is why I give Woodley the shot over Johnny. Which, dude, I too think Johnny is 3-0 in title fights, where on his record he's 1-2. I think he beat GSP. I think he beat Robbie both times. I think that just mix of skills, his D1 All-American wrestling skills matched with that powerful punching and just leaving everyone, if not knocked out, leaving them marked up as fuck. I think Johnny would beat Woodley if they're both fighting full strength. But I give the title shot to Woodley because we were supposed to see that fight back in, I believe, October at UFC 192. We were supposed to see Tyron versus Johnny. And the reason I give the title fight to Tyron is because Johnny backed out of the fight. And yeah, it wasn't like he voluntarily wanted to back out. He had, trouble weight cutting, his kidneys fucked up or something. But Johnny pulled out, and for that reason, I'm giving the shot. Woodley was there. Woodley was ready to fight Johnny, and Johnny, couldn't make it and couldn't, answer the bell. And I think Johnny probably would have won, but the fact that he didn't make it to fight, there's your shot right there. You fucked up, and that puts you behind Woodley in line.
Oh boy. I mean, I guess I can see where you're coming with that one there. Woodley, though, I mean, for me, I look at it kind of like TJ Dillashaw versus Renan Barão. That was supposed to be an immediate rematch. Renan Barão, kind of a similar issue, had the issue with the weight cut, and TJ Dillashaw, who was it? He ended up fighting Joe Soto or somebody like that. I believe it was Soto before he ended up defending again against Renan Barão. But Robbie Lawler, he defended against Rory McDonald. I mean, first of all, why was Johnny Hendricks cutting weight to fight Tyron Woodley in the first place? Why? I mean, I don't know. I guess it's to avoid the whole these guys fighting
eating them
3
steaks,
times.
boy. Big Rig Steakhouse. He plumps up in the off season. Woo!
That he does. But I mean, he should have been matched up for that Robbie Lawler fight again, at least just in my opinion, because that was a robbery. That was Johnny Hendricks should have never lost his title in the first place, and I don't know why he's been moved to the back of the line, and Robbie Lawler is going to defend his title potentially 3 times before Johnny Hendricks gets back to the title. If he does, pretty fucked up. I really am pulling for Johnny Hendricks to win the fight over Wonder Boy and get that next title shot, but really, all the hype is on Woodley, and quite frankly, I cannot understand why. If you look at his UFC record too, I don't know that it necessarily even warrants it.
Yeah, his UFC record. I mean, I just had his page up, but before I clicked it, I think he's on a two fight win streak. Yeah, he's not been able to win more than 2 fights in a row. Lost his last fight in Strikeforce, that KO to Nate Marquardt. Beat Jay Heron, lost to Jake Shields. Beat Koscheck and Condit. And then lost to Rory, which that loss to Rory was embarrassing. I mean, he could not get past that jab. That was one of the more one-sided decisions you'll ever see. A fight against Kim, a fight against Gastelum. I do, to give him credit, the fight against Gastelum was a split, but Woodley won that fight. And a lot of people point out, oh, well, he only beat Condit because Condit got injured. Like, Woodley was whooping his ass. So yeah, Rory gave it to him, but he's young, he's getting better. 33. It'll be a little weird having 2 guys fight who both train out of the same gym, American Top Team in Coconut Creek. But I think you do what you got to do, and I think Woodley's expressed interest in fighting his teammate Robbie Lawler for the strap. Which I actually, it's funny. After UFC 167, I caught Woodley in the lobby of the MGM. Woodley had just beat Koscheck. Lawler had just beat Rory. And I said, hey, Woodley, you get to fight your teammate Robbie next? And he's like, no, not unless we have to. This might be a situation where you're looking like you might have to. I guess that's all I've got, except for a couple bits of the presser, unless you have anything to add in.
I mean, I just think even Neil Magny would be a better choice for a title shot, as opposed to. I mean, they both of them have split decision wins over Kelvin Gastelum as their last victory. Eric Silva was Neil Magny's. No, I'll say it. His only loss was to Damian Maia. He rattled off like a 7-fight win streak. Save for his loss to Seth Baczynski and Sergio Moraes back when he first came in. I mean, at least his body of work is a little more reflective. I mean, he's got a solid victory over Tim Means, who's looking good. The Dominican Nightmare, Alex Garcia, not bad guys there. Young Y Lim, good prospect there.
Young Y Lim.
And Tyron Woodley, he's been up and down. He doesn't even have as many fights as the win streak that Neil Magny put together in the UFC welterweight division. He's got a win over Jay Heron, no longer in the UFC. a win over Josh Koscheck, no longer in the UFC. Carlos Condit about to retire. And then Dong Hyun Kim and Kelvin Gastelum, they're like, what, top 15 if they're ranked? Like, it's just that he's being considered over Hendricks.
That
I don't
win
get
over
it.
Condit was big for him. That
was a big win.
Time shit.
And you know what? And I'm not one of those guys, he deserved that. He was blasting Condit. He was putting it on Condit like really nobody had ever beaten him so violently. I mean, and if we're being honest, that's probably why the injury happened, because he was
that win against Condit is way bigger than any win that Magny's gotten.
I mean, that is certainly true, but the fact remains that win was subsequently, I mean, all the momentum from that was undone by the absolute destruction that Rory McDonald put on him. So that's, I mean,
it's embarrassing. And that was just that was on like three months notice. I don't know if that had anything to play into it, but Rory, I mean, it
3
just
months or
showed
3 weeks?
that Woodley three months.
Okay.
Which Rory just dominated that range. He did not let him get in on him.
Yeah, no, that was just a masterwork on range by Rory McDonald. He was able to pick him apart from every single direction, just mixing it up, the strikes. Like, it reminded me of TJ Dillashaw's fight against Mike Easton, in the sense that it was just the work that these guys were putting in, the discrepancy that they were showing versus their opponents. It was a superb, it was like it was like an Xbox Live matchup where you got two guys who are just completely, one guy's like super high ranked and he's taking on some newbie, and the newbie really shouldn't be playing against him, but it's like 4:00 in the morning and there's just nobody else on the server. So this is all you got. That's kind of what it was like. And it was just, it was a complete,
they did not look like they belonged in the ring with one another. No. Rory
was just toying with Tyron Woodley. So it's I don't know, for me, tough to get past that. And I really think that, and again, Tyron, I mean, a lot of it that has to do with his opponents pulling out. He hasn't been so active, and he's only got a 2-fight winning streak. Really hard for me to not give the shot to Hendricks if he's successful.
Yeah, and man, we will hear a couple clips on it here. I'm going to play the post-fight presser highlights. Yeah, we'll hear Lawler talk about his prospects. I don't know if they get to it in the presser, but apparently Condit was talking about maybe a potential retirement. Just feeling like he earned that win and didn't get it, which I thought was just like so ironic, because I thought back and I was like, wait, when Condit won that bullshit robbery over Nick Diaz, didn't Nick Diaz talk about retiring too? Like, is this going to be a thing? Like, all right, Condit gets a BS decision over Diaz. Diaz talks about retiring. Lawler gets a BS decision over Condit. Condit talks about retiring. Who's going to get a BS decision over Lawler to make him talk about hanging the gloves up? I just thought it was a weird duality thing there. I got the clip right here. As always, it starts with Dana White giving you the facts of the fight. As far as the numbers, they obviously weren't as high, because I think you had a little bit of a hangover from UFC 194, which was in the same arena just 2 weeks prior.
There were 10,300 people here tonight. The gate was just a little over $2 million. Fight of the night, Lawler Condit. And the performance bonuses go to Miocic, which I had to do or he would kill me probably, and McDonald.
And first thing, we check in with the champ. still champ, Robbie Lawler.
Carlos is so tough. I feel like I hit him with some big shots, and he kept coming and throwing knees. He's tough. It's just a testament to the kind of fighter he is. He showcased who he is, and he's everything everyone said he was.
We throw it back to his opponent, or not back to his opponent, but to his opponent, Carlos Condit.
Tonight was kind of it was like a do or die moment for my career, I feel like, and I was all in, and if I got that strap, I was gonna keep fighting. If I didn't, I didn't, I have to see if I can continue to do this.
His move.
And then back to Robbie.
Movement was awesome. He's clever. He's sharp, and he can take a shot. I mean, those guys put together a great game plan. He's in shape. He's a champion. He's a guy who's been doing this a long time. So Carlos was everything they said he was, and I had to dig deep, and hats off to him.
Then we went to Stipe Miocic.
Do you feel like this now gives you the title shot against the winner of next month's show?
Yeah, I think so. Did it in good fashion. I would like that.
Okay.
Two more. The guy who returned after 2 years, Michael McDonald.
I do a lot of weird stuff like that, like just making it up at the gym, and I don't really know. I mean, I probably have seen it somewhere, but honestly, when I fought Hinnenbrow, I was caught in an arm triangle, and looking back on that a bunch of times, I just wish that I would have just freaked out and just done anything I possibly can and just passed out instead of tapping, So I got total flashbacks as soon as I caught me in an arm triangle. So as soon as my air started to go away, dude, I was just like, I'm either passing out or I'm taking this guy's back. And I'm just going, and I ended up getting it.
Then finally we go to the Diamond, Dustin Poirier.
I think there's a lot of fights out there that make sense, man. My goal was to crack the top 10 last year. That didn't happen with the fight falling out. Hopefully I'll be up there now, and I want top 10 opponents.
What's a top 10 guy after a win over Joe Duffy? I do want to play this clip from the post-fight press conference. This is so cringeworthy. Oh, my God. Pat, did you hear about the guy who called on Albert Tumanoff and called him Robbie?
Thinking he was Robbie Lawler.
Yeah, because he, to the guy's benefit, with the beanie especially, Tumanoff does look kind of like Lawler, but not that much.
Bro.
And he's not sitting in the chair next to the podium like Robbie would be. A pretty embarrassing moment here.
A few questions for Robbie, please. Robbie, congrats. I wanted to ask you, there's a really cool moment there at the at the end of the fight where you guys kind of collapsed at the same time on the cage. Were you aware of that? I mean, what's going through your head, and how do you feel in that moment? I'm sorry. So sorry. My bad.
What happened?
I'll wait.
He doesn't have. Are you a translator, sir?
Yeah, you.
I'll wait for Rob. My bad.
No, you mentioned Robbie, you didn't say Albert, so.
Oh, you thought that was Robbie Lawler?
With the beanie, it threw me off. My bad.
You cover this sport? Yeah. You thought that was Robbie Lawler?
I'm sorry.
I thought Robbie may be sitting on the other side. I can't see, so. If you repeat the question, I'll translate.
He'll pass it on to Robbie for you.
Yeah, that was so cringeworthy, especially thinking back. I've actually done. You and I have both done press at Glory shows. I went to the post-fight presser for Glory Denver. I asked, I think, 1 or 2 questions, and you're sitting there waiting for the mic to get passed over. And you're just like wording it in your head over and over, making sure the phrasing's right, trying to make it as concise as possible. You don't want to sound like a dumbass, and you want to ask a respectful question. So just being in that seat, knowing what it's like to be sitting there for 10 minutes waiting to ask a single question, and then asking it, and then realizing, holy shit, I mistook this guy for Robbie Lawler. and then getting a little bit clowned by Dana White. That was man, that was one of the most cringe-worthy moments I've seen in a long time at a presser, maybe ever. Just Jesus Christ, you gotta feel for the poor guy.
No, that was crazy. You know what? Jake, I said I did not feel for that poor guy. I said, you know what? I think Dana White actually, at a point, he said, "You cover this sport?" And I was thinking the same exact thing. I said, "Man, what's up with your boys at the MMA podcast? You know, we can get those credentials and cover a wide range of
Homie
events."
just has bad sight. He has vision problems.
I mean, if that's the case, you know, my bad. Sorry, guy. He said my bad. He said my bad. I was like, oh, bro, you're saying my bad on there? No, at least, I apologize.
Halfway in, he cut himself off. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I fucked up. Like, oh, no.
No, I don't know, man. I think I don't know. I think that's just a lack of awareness. I really cannot appreciate any such lack of awareness like that. And really, you know, what's up? You know, like you said, you and I both did a little media work there for Glory Kickboxing, and yeah, I myself attended the
New York Rick.
Shout out to New York Rick coming through. And, you know, I'd like to think we represented ourselves fairly well, did not make a mockery of ourselves or our representation of the podcast, or, you know, as knowledgeable members of the media. That's just, I don't know. I don't feel a whole lot of sympathy for the guy. I understand nerves and public speaking and things like that, but you got to be prepared and you got to be aware. And Dana, got to hook up your boys with that press credential. What's really good?
Hook it up, Dana. Uncle D, I know you got us blocked, but that's because you took an innocent joke the wrong way. We don't have time for the whole story. We will move on from UFC 195. Don't have any cards to break down, but we do have a little news. So let's get to the news. According to a Mr. Dana White, who should definitely give us media credentials. What up, Dana? Ryan Bader will earn a title shot with a win against Anthony Rumble Johnson. Seems like a no-brainer, but Dana, I guess, saying it makes it official, even though he doesn't, because he backtracks on half the shit he says. So, the fact that this was a no-brainer, whether or not he said it, sort of makes me think this locks it in. What do you think Bader's odds are? You know, this fight is going down in 2 weeks, I believe, January 30th. The odds right now on the fight are very slanted toward Rumble Johnson. Rumble's minus 475 to Bader's plus 380. This is one of those cards. If it's, you know, a pick'em, I'm going with Rumble, but I really like Bader's chances at plus 400. Are you kidding me? Like, you know, Johnson has shown holes in his game, and yeah, as impressive as he's looked in wins against guys like Gus, man, he's shown weakness. I mean, that fight against DC was pretty ugly. Man, I'm looking at his record now. He got so good when he moved up. He lost to Vitor at 185, and since he moved up, that Cormier loss was his only loss. He beat the fuck out of Jimmy Manuwa, Little Nog, Gus, Davis, Arlovsky. Fuck, man, Rumble is just another one of these. Man, 205 is so stacked. Seriously, I mean, you have Rumble, who's a top 5 guy with his fucking skill. I mean, John Jones is maybe the pound for pound greatest of all time. You have Cormier, who, I mean, goddamn, put it to Rumble, put it to Gus. God, as much as we hear about lightweight and featherweight being the best weight classes. If we're talking top 5, this top 5 at 205 is deadly. Cormier, Jones, Gustafsson, Rumble, Bader. Those are 5 ferocious fighters. And as much as Rumble should be a favorite, man, Bader has been looking good. I mean, I think plus 400, there might be a little bit of value in that, just because he's been a live dog, and he's won those fights against guys like Rashad Evans, guys who were supposed to beat him. Guys like, who else here? I mean, I think he was a decent dog against Phil Davis. I think he may have been a dog against OSP. He's used to that role.
Yeah, he certainly is. And I think Ryan Bader, he definitely has a good shot. This is a guy I've certainly not given too much credit to. I thought he was going to lose his last couple fights, if I'm being honest, but he really seems to have put things together quite nicely. He seems to be in a good mental state right now, and the training seems to be coming together well. He looks to be going back to more of his wrestling. He does have some decent fundamentals with the hands, but definitely seems to be more focusing on what got him to where he is, which is that wrestling. And granted, that right hand did give him a lot of good early success as well. But he's putting together what seems to be smarter game plans for the opponent he's facing at the time. And I think it's going to be a takedown and ground and pound centric type of game plan that he's going to want to employ against Johnson. And those are really the ones that he does not like. We saw Daniel Cormier put that on him. The only question is Ryan Bader going to have the skills to do that? Now, we saw Anthony Johnson take on a very strong wrestler in Phil Davis, a guy that a lot of people thought Phil Davis would be able to out-grapple Anthony Johnson. Anthony Johnson showed great fundamentals, great ability in the Phil Davis fight, and put a savage beating.
Whoops.
A random drop.
Rogan hacked into the podcast. I apologize to that people.
That SOB. I mean, hey, if the MMA podcast is good enough for Joe Rogan, I'm just saying. But no, Anthony Johnson, like I said, he was able to do real good against the wrestling attack of Phil Davis. So where does Ryan Bader's credentials lie? Is Anthony Johnson's skill set going to be enough to thwart off that attack? Daniel Cormier, also a factor. He did have a lower center of gravity for that, which everybody knows that's a main facet of grappling and specifically wrestling, is keeping that low center of gravity. That's going to be an advantage for you in the grappling game. Ryan Bader and Anthony Johnson, fairly similar in height and reach. So is Ryan going to be able to get low? Is he going to be able to avoid those bombs? Because Anthony Johnson, my goodness, as you mentioned, I mean, he went on that tear just destroying everybody. Manua, Gustafsson, violent knockouts. Rogerio, the violent KO he put on Rogerio a while back. He is not to be messed with. But just given the, like you were saying, with the odds what they are, Bader plus 380 and Johnson, what was it, minus 400, closer to minus 500. I definitely think those are a bit off. Bader, definitely a decent value bet. I mean, I'm thinking Johnson is going to be able to take this one, but man, Ryan Bader certainly. I feel with the work he's put in against his last few opponents, I think he's got that 4-fight win streak going right now. I don't think he should be plus 380, maybe plus 200, maybe even plus 250, but close to the 400s, man, I'm a little bit surprised at that. I think Bader's got a bit better of a shot than that.
Yeah, I do too. Bader, you said it, the takedown and the ground and pound alone, just the threat of that, I think is worth maybe throwing a flyer on. Moving on, Jacare. Apparently he wants Weidman a rematch against Yoel Romero. And with Luke Rockhold hinting, he said in an interview earlier today that he thinks the rematch against Weidman is his likely next fight. That would line up Jacare Romero too. Is that a fight that you want to see personally? I definitely will want to see it. I don't know how you give Yoel that fight. I'm sorry, but round 3 was clearly a 10-9 to Jacare. Round 2, clearly 10-9 Jacare. Even if you give that first round a 10-8 to Yoel, it's still a draw. That fight deserves to be run back, especially with both guys being a little bit older, 36 and 38. It was a close fight. It's a fight that I think Yoel snuck past, and I want to see the Yoel rematch, damn it. Do you want to see the Yoel rematch, damn it?
Damn it, Jake, I think that's a fine idea. Rematches all the way around. Let's have Weidman Rockhold too. Let's do Romero Jacare too. I think with Romero, I mean, he's super solid first round. Yet a very closely contested fight. That's another one I still need to go back and rewatch. Actually, I might just do that after we're done with this podcast, because that was, man, that was a barn burner, and I want to see more of that. You probably should have gone Jacare's way for sure. Yoel's my boy, though. That dude, I just love watching him fight. And, I could have sworn I heard some talk about Romero being next for the title shot. But as even Luke Rockhold himself pointed out, Romero certainly has some cardio work to do if he wants to come and take on either Luke Rockhold or if Chris Weidman is able to get his championship back. Either way, if Romero's going to be going in these 5-round wars, he's got to get his cardio up. And that was very evident in the fight against Jacare. I mean, he had that first round handily won with the damage he did, specifically with the spinning back fist, and then the subsequent ground and pound. But he gassed hard in that fight. Maybe if he had a bit of a tank, he would have been able to rightfully win that. So let's see if he can get his cardio back up. Let's see if Jacare can right what he and a lot of people feel is a wrong in him not getting that victory. And I think it's a good opportunity for them to tune up. And the Rockhold Weidman, if they were to do a rematch of that, certainly wouldn't be upset. I think Weidman was doing a good job in that fight up until that spinning back kick. That was really, he was out of the fight after that takedown, that ground and pound. I think that was the 3rd round, and he just got super beat up after that. And then the 4th round, answered the bell, got finished in the 4th. But I think he was, I want to say he won the 1st and 2nd, and then lost the 3rd after that spinning wheel kick, really. So let's run them both back. Why not? I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. We got 2 other fights that were announced this past week, the first of which being a heavyweight bout, Frank Mir and Mark Hunt, targeted for UFC Fight Night Brisbane. Both of these guys have only won 2 of their last 6. Hunt against Bigfoot and Roy Nelson, Mir against Bigfoot and Todd Duffy. I think this comes down to a lot of things for me, but I think Frank Mir's got the chin to weather the early storm, and I think he ends up getting a sub. And although Mark Hunt hasn't been subbed since, in his UFC debut, he got straight arm barred by Sean McCorkle in a minute 3. That doesn't bear well against a sub guy like Frank Mir. And yes, I know he's fought a lot of really impressive opponents since, and his ground game is a lot better. And he won his last fight against Bigfoot, both of them on a bit of a resurgence. Hunt getting back in the win column. Mir 2-1 in his last 3 after a 4-fight losing streak. and, stood in there for 15 minutes against the pit bull Andrei Arlovsky just a few months ago. I'm giving this one to Frank Mir. I think when Hunt starts getting winded, Mir takes advantage, brings it to the mat, and subs him out. What do you think?
Yeah, this is definitely a great style matchup. I mean, Mir, if this were a year and a half, 2 years ago, easily would have just given that to Mark Hunt right away. But Frank Mir seems to be rejuvenated, seems to be doing some good things. I mean, yeah, in spite of the Arlovsky setback, if I recall, I want to say that was a fairly close fight too. Maybe I'm tripping and that was soundly Arlovsky's, but I want to say that was also a closely contested fight. But I mean, hey, for Frank Mir to survive and not get KO'd and go the 15, that's another long time UFC heavyweight veteran. That's for a lot of big KOs, and so I was glad to at least see him go the whole 15 and not incur too much concussive damage there. But yeah, I really think that Frank Mir he'll be able to do just a little bit more. Both are crafty veterans, but Frank Mir has been a little more well-rounded for a little longer now. Granted, he may not want to test the striking too much with Mark Hunt, but he does have a good size and reach advantage over him. Granted, Mark Hunt is no stranger to negotiating a height and reach advantage. It seems like he's done that in a good majority of both his MMA and even a good portion of his kickboxing career as well. So he knows how to get inside on a guy and really put him down. Man, I dare say this one is a toss, a pick 'em fight. It's a toss-up just based on the fact that Mark Hunt, he has really shored up that ground game. He shored up that takedown defense. Frank Mir, known more as a jiu-jitsu grappler, not necessarily a wrestler with his takedowns. Mark Hunt does have that low center of gravity. Man, I think this will be fairly close on the lines as well. I'm leaning Mir here just a little bit, though. Mir would not be surprised to see Hunt take it. Man, I don't know if my prediction will stay on this one. I always have a tough time picking the heavyweights. Hate picking the heavyweights, but right now I'm leaning Mir a little bit.
We're both leaning toward Frank there. I have a feeling we'll both be leaning the same way on this one. Joe Benavidez and Zach Makovsky. You got to give it to Zach, fun size. Makovsky, since I think it was the first RFA event I went to, RFA 11. He won the title, was brought over to the UFC, and he's only lost twice since, 3-2, losing to Hussier Formiga and John Dodson. I think Zach is a top 5 flyweight. I think he's earned his spot. He'll be in the UFC a long time. Joe, in my eyes, is the easy number 2 at 125, especially with Dodson moving up back to bantamweight. Benavidez, since moving down to flyweight, he's 8-2, and those 2 losses are both to the same guy, the pound-for-pound king, Demetrius Johnson. And after this win, you got to start talking about the third fight. I mean, Benavidez doesn't just beat everyone he fights, not named Mighty Mouse. He kicks their ass. None of these fights are close. I feel like it's another 30-27 or a finish. And I feel like Benavidez can stake a claim to get another title shot. Because looking at the flyweights, I mean, unless it's Henry Cejudo, I don't really see any other fight you can make for the next title shot at flyweight. Are you leaning toward Joby too over Zach Makovsky?
I certainly am, Jake. And Makovsky, former Bellator bantamweight champion, if I recall correctly. You mentioned RFA flyweight champion. He's a great background too. Definitely a better college wrestling background than Joseph Benavidez, at least to my recollection.
But as you mentioned, Joseph Benavidez, he has only ever lost. He's got the Uriah Faber thing going on. He's only ever lost in title fights. As a matter of fact, he's never won a major title. He never won the WBC or UFC titles, and only ever having lost to Dominic Cruz and Demetrius Johnson, 2 pound-for-pound great fighters. Now, Makovsky, as you mentioned, his only 2 losses in the UFC, very tough competition. Hussier Formiga has been one of the top flyweights in the world for some time, and he continues to get better. John Dodson, perennially the number 1 or number 2 flyweight in the world. So he's only ever lost to elite competition himself, at least in the UFC. But you have to give this one to Benavidez. He's the complete package. He's got the striking, he's got the wrestling, and he's just got that X factor. If you look, let's say at the 4-5 win streak he's on now, because he's got a solid win streak in the flyweight division, having beat the likes of Dustin Ortiz, a super strong prospect for flyweight. Benavidez, he's still beating everybody. And I think he's going to continue to do it with Makovsky. Could be a very close fight. I mean, and again, styles make fights. Makovsky, he could get the upset here. I'm certainly not sleeping on him at all. His wrestling credentials are very strong, and he seems to be improving in his striking game as well. And we all know that styles make fights. Hussier Formiga, certainly a different style than Joseph Benavidez. John Dodson, while he does have a similar style, he's got a similar pedigree to Joseph Benavidez. The style's perhaps not too similar. John Dodson, super quick, more of a striker, uses the grappling to stay up primarily. He likes to stand up, test the boxing. Versus Joseph, he's good everywhere it goes, and so is Makovsky. They've both got great credentials, and it'll be really interesting to see how their styles match up. But yeah, you definitely have to give it to Joe. Can't sleep on Makovsky though.
Yeah, I don't know. I see another one-sided fight. And I think that does it for the news. One more clip I wanted to play before we get out of here. They had this thing called Counterpunch that they showed during UFC 195, and it got us all pretty amped up for a fight we're going to see in about a week and a couple days. Dillashaw versus Cruz. I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong here. Cruz pretty much clowns Dillashaw during this interview with John Anik. I'll play the audio, and then we can sort of talk about it. But yeah, here's the minute or so long audio.
This is Counterpunch. We are joined today by the current UFC bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw and the former champion Dominic Cruz. So this is a guy that has been on your radar for quite some time, sort of envisioning a possible date down the line. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely, man. When I got in the sport, he was the champ. The goal was to be the best in the world, and he was there right then. And I made some huge leaps and bounds, and now I'm here.
Is this the closest fighter to what you try to do that you've ever shared the octagon with?
He mixes up things better than any of the opponents that I've faced so far at 135 pounds, but he hasn't faced somebody like me. He's able to mix things up because he's facing stationary targets. So he's been able to look a lot better than he really is.
He's just a talker, man. You know, he's just gonna try to overanalyze this because I don't need to.
Why?
Because I don't want to.
I think you're scared to talk because you don't want to say what you're gonna do because you're scared to eat your words.
All right, man.
So say
Fair
it.
enough.
Tell me.
I don't need to.
I'll do it right here. I'm gonna beat you because I'm better than you.
I already told you I was gonna knock your ass out.
How?
Don't worry about how I'm gonna knock you out. I'm gonna do it.
You're gonna knock me out. That's how you're gonna beat me? Nobody even hits me.
You're gonna get hit.
How are you gonna hit me?
You got some holes in your game, man.
That's all you gotta say? You got no reasoning. You got no backup. You got holes in your game and I hit harder than you. Those are both opinions. There's no facts behind it. What's the facts you have stating why you're gonna do what you're gonna do?
That I'm breaking records for significant strikes landed.
Yeah, you're a dangerous fighter against stationary targets. Your power doesn't matter if you can't hit something. I'm hit least amount of anybody in the division.
All right, man, I'm done talking to you.
You can't be done talking to me. You're right here facing me, dummy. You gotta talk to me. You have no choice. You got nowhere to go. Keep talking. I'm better than you because I've beaten people that are better than you. I'm
all
better
this
than you
is,
because
dude.
I've beaten
That's all it
champions
is.
that are still winning. Tell me why you're
already
better
said
than
it,
me.
dude.
No, you haven't. You
Already
said you're
said
going to knock me on 2 rounds and I got holes in my game.
You run around and don't do nothing.
I don't
You're
get
talking
hit.
about your striking.
I don't
your
get
striking
hit. You're
is so
talking about how-
dangerous. My numbers blow you out of the water.
Yeah, I
No,
have more
you do not.
title fights than you too, man.
My
Yes.
UFC record is way better than yours.
Yeah, because you've been able to fight while I've been hurt.
Exactly.
So you
Sitting
have
on
more
your ass
fights
talking.
in the UFC.
Talking.
You're fake, man. You're a fake person. You pretend to be cool with people, but you're not. And that's why I don't mind talking to you, because you're fake. You're not real, man. You're like Mr. Nice Guy, but it's not real.
I don't
It's
think
not
we
real.
need to wait. There's an octagon right
Oh,
we
love
could
to.
just, I bet
I'd
we
love
could,
to.
right? I bet you would. This fight, of course, January 17th for the UFC Bantamweight Championship in Boston, Massachusetts, my hometown. Any final thoughts?
Can't come soon enough, man. I'm ready to shut this guy's mouth.
The emotions in the room were palpable, P-Money. Cruz just, I mean, God damn, I haven't seen a guy more flustered since Conor snatched up Jose's belt in Dublin. I mean, Dillashaw was just getting pushed around in that interview by Dominic Cruz. Dominic Cruz, a guy who, I mean, shit. Yeah, he's been out with injuries, all that. Hasn't lost since. I mean, his last loss. Can you guess the year his only loss came in? He's 20-1. His only loss to Uriah Faber.
Oh man, I mean, I've been watching since back in the day. Probably watched that one. I want to say that was 2006,
2007. And if you can name the main event, it was Cruz's Zuffa debut. If you can name the main event, I will buy you 10 wings in Vegas if you come to UFC 197.
Okay. All right. Well, hand of God,
Walters.
don't have the Wikipedia in front of me. Obviously, with my inaccurate guess there, I will say
WEC 26, March 24th, 2007. 10 wing Walters will give you 10 Hooters chicken wings in Las Vegas if you can accurately predict.
Oh my goodness, I'm gonna say Carlos Condit versus Maeda.
Oh, I'm going to buy you 5 wings because you were so close. Carlos Condit versus John Alessio.
Oh, ooh.
Which I think randomly, I may have texted you like
Yes,
a few weeks
yes.
ago when I was in Plant City seeing family. And I'm like, bro, you'll never guess in a million years the most random ass fight that they have going on Fox Sports, like Central Florida currently. And it was Carlos Condit versus John Alessio.
Yeah, no, that was me.
Good
I remember
times.
being quite shocked. I was like, wait a second, that was a UFC fight? I didn't know they showed a WEC on the regional Fox networks. That's clutch programming.
It's crazy. Dom Cruz only has 3 UFC fights under his belt.
Yeah, that's crazy. And
He
it's
beat
so funny that
Demetrius Johnson and then didn't fight for 3 years. And then didn't fight for like 1.5 years.
Yeah. And it's so funny, too, that TJ says, oh, my UFC record's better than yours. Doesn't he have 2 losses on his UFC record?
Yeah, it's like,
he's got almost
better than Cruz's because Cruz has beat the pound for pound king. You're 12-2. He's 20-1. You lost to John Dodson and Rafael Asunciao. Cruz lost to your like the Darth Vader to your Luke Skywalker and Uriah Faber. Like,
and avenged that loss.
yeah.
So, I mean, he's
would
got.
have avenged it twice if not for injury.
Well, theoretically, I mean, they did not fight, but yeah, certainly was on his way to attempting to avenge that for the second time and put the definitive stamp on that trilogy. Yeah, certainly debatable. TJ saying that his record is better, and he does have a point. You know, Cruz was able to handle Dillashaw, or Cruz was able to handle Asunciao. And you look at those names on Dillashaw's record. I mean, really, besides Barao, you know,
Like,
maybe
besides Barao, who is he beating, dog? Joe Soto, Mike Easton, Hugo Viana, Vaughn Lee, Willel Watson, Issei Tamura, 2 or 4 motherfuckers before the UFC who don't have Wikipedias. Who has Dominic Cruz beaten? Joseph Benavidez twice. Uriah Faber, Mighty Mouse. Fucking and let's really stop and look at this. Mighty Mouse. And it wasn't like, oh, he barely edged out. He fucked the pound for pound king.
He suplexed Mighty Mouse. He fucking suplexed Mighty Mouse. He set him down to 125.
Brian Bowles when the bowl was coming strong. Like,
yeah. Second round TKO just piecing him. Yeah, and I mean even Joe Soto was able to get some good pops in on TJ Dillashaw there. So
I think Cruz gonna fuck him up.
Oh, I'm hoping. I mean, no disrespect. I love watching TJ fight. He puts on good shows, but man, I really want to see Dominic come back and just get that belt he never lost. I think really we all do, and it kind of sucks for Dillashaw because, I mean, he's certainly done enough in the time that Dominic Cruz has been away. I mean, just by default, again, he did put the wins together. He did end up getting in there against the champ, and he did end up getting the W, and he's been able to retain and defend since. So, more power to him. But, man, I think the good majority, except for the people that, like, train with TJ Dillashaw and TJ Dillashaw himself, I think pretty much all of us want to see Dominic get in there and dominate and get that 135-pound strap again.
And we will be back next week to break down that whole card. UFC Fight Night 81 from the TD Garden in Boston, Massachusetts, January 17th. TJ Dillashaw versus Dominic Cruz for the undisputed Bantamweight Championship. We'll also see Anthony Pettis talk about 2 guys who rarely fight, Dominic Cruz and Anthony Pettis. The fact they're both fighting on the same card is like a aligning of the planets. Pettis will be fighting Eddie Alvarez, Travis Brown versus Matt Mitrione, Ross Pearson versus Francisco Trinaldo. That's your main card. We'll be back next week breaking down all the news of the week, breaking down this card, talking about tweets, taking your calls as always. The number is 213-457-3380. We'll probably aim to do it Wednesday night. As always, if you want to know when we're going live, follow us on Twitter at the MMA Podcast. You can follow P Money at Sweet Pappy Jones. Pat, what else is going on with you before we close it out?
Jake, well, it's big West Coast pimping over here. We're puffing tough, we're stuffing muff, and we're just doing the damn thing. Always a pleasure doing it with you. Always a pleasure giving the fans what they love, and can't wait to break down the UFC Fight Night a little more in depth with you next week.
Meat Loaf and Comb. What? That's right, and we will be back next week. Visit the MMApodcast.com. Click the links at the top. Listen to our sister podcast, the Filthy FRB Show, with Front Row Brian and Tom Lawler. That should be coming back this week. And honestly, even if you don't know shit about amateur wrestling, listen to the T. Rowan Funky Show. It's interesting. As an MMA fan, you find out a lot about, the goings-on in college wrestling. Guys like Isaiah Martinez, Cade Brock, who else? Kyle Snyder, the fucking Logan Stieber. They talk college wrestling, Olympic wrestling. This dude, Bo Nickel. I mean, these crazy, crazy wrestlers, crazy athletes, and guys who we might see make that step over to MMA, like we've seen Ben Askren do, multiple time champion at the NCAA level. And I mean, God, just look at your current major mixed martial arts champions. Most of them have that wrestling base, and if you really want to get a good understanding of amateur wrestling, go ahead and listen. It's Ben Askren, who, if you're an MMA fan, you know is a storied wrestler from the University of Missouri. You have Tommy Rollins from Ohio State, another legendary wrestler. Both of them breaking down the current events, and I mean, talk about guests. They recently had Daniel Cormier on. I believe they're going to have Chael Sonnen on in the next week or two. They got awesome interviews. So go ahead and check them out on Twitter at TRoFunkyShow and give them a listen. Thank you for giving us a listen. We will be back next week to break down the news, to break down Dillashaw Cruz. That rhymed. We gone. We out of this shit. Peace.
Tune into the MMA Podcast every Tuesday night.
Act the wild style, always been a foul child.
The MMA Podcast, Jake is the host. And since Ramsey's been in a wheelchair, the Aunt Jimmy Show has been on a roll. I want to say John Jones is a host, so I think that I'll pick up the phone and dial 213-457-3380. We got hot takes on the stove. You get blood on your clothes if you're sitting in the front row. I throw on my gi and then I lace the hoops. I'll have Gal lying down cause he ain't the truth. And if Alan wasn't a cop, I'd mention you. And shout out to Ross Finkelstein the Jew. Cause according to you, you're an MMA guru. A Brew Bisbing lost his hands, Count Dooku. If you're a fancy boy, you get a 2-minute slot. Mystery wants a title shot. So listen to the MMA Podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I want the strap. But you know that I'll never tap. So listen to the MMA Podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I want the strap. And you know that I won't tap. Mystery. The MMA Podcast. Most of us just live and breathe this fighting shit. Shout out to Jake. Shout out to Jake.